Most of us, in terms of Black folks, we didn't own any of the venues downtown. So we were going to try to get those venues for events. You get those questions like, okay, what kind of crowd is it going to be, right? Okay, who's it going to be? And you show up and they find out you are Black, you either get charged a higher rental to some of the premier spots. You won't even get an opportunity to throw the party.
Talk to me about the need that you saw when you got the idea for Eventnoire, because I think a lot about events and, having thrown parties, having been to the DJ and et cetera, like it's often harder than it should be to get booked for Black events. And, but you go to white parties and they'd be playing our music, but it'd be this many of us there. But then, so talk to me about like what the concept was that gave you the idea for this.
Definitely, man. So one of the things that we found out, hosting events for 15 years, especially in the metro area, urban area, right? We found out, most of us, in terms of Black folks, we didn't own any of the venues downtown. So we were going to try to get those venues for events. You get those questions like, okay, what kind of crowd is it going to be, right? Okay, who's it going to be? And you show up and they find out you are Black. You either get charged a higher rental to some of the premier spots. You won't even get an opportunity to throw the party. They'll tell you the date's not available, et cetera. So it was just a lot of frustration. We realized that we were making the venues that we did partner with a lot of money, but we didn't own those. And we were making the liquor brands that we helped support a lot of money, and we didn't own any of that. And so for us, we just want to create a way for us to own a piece of the event ecosystem because we know the influence that Black people have on arts, culture, entertainment, especially as it relates to events.
What would you say are some like the non-obvious discriminatory practices that might happen? Like the things that the consumers may not even realize, they're being not opportune, they don't have the opportunity to take advantage of because we don't have the opportunities in the actual production space.
Yeah, so this is one thing that I always like to point out when we talk about events and just around my colleagues. And we're getting ready to take a group of about 30 of us out to dinner in the event space here in Chicago. We're getting a tour together just to speak to different event promoters. But think about this. If you go to a party where it's predominantly Caucasian folks, you're never going to hear somebody say, man, it needs to be more diverse in here. Well, we would hear during our Black events, we're like, man, can you guys make it a little bit more diverse? Like we need, try to get some white folks, some Latino folks in here. That's something that we never heard, when we were at other events, where we were always the minority. So, here in Chicago, where I'm from, I'd say that when you get about 25 to 30% of an African-American crowd in your party, all of a sudden it becomes a Black party. And so what happens is you'll hear managers and owners at times say, look, hey, it's getting a little, we got to stop. You see doormen stop letting in Black people and using the dress code. So we saw all types of things in our 15 years. And then you get kicked off of nights as a promoter. They say, hey, we're not going to be able to do business anymore. The neighbors are complaining. Of course, we're catering to doctors, lawyers, all professionals. So when we hear complaints about neighbors complaining about people being there, we know that it's just because they see a group of Black folks and they see us as an eyesore. And so for us, again, we just knew ownership was the way. And the first thing we thought about was ticketing and really being able to own that piece, because we looked at the general market ticket partners out there. We know that they weren't truly event partners. They didn't do anything to support our events. And we were like, what if we could start a ticketing platform and actually partner with people, help them get venues, but also just a central marketplace where Black people could find events where they'll be welcomed and embraced instead of being turned away at the door, instead of being told that they're not going to be able to get in. Just a place where we can be ourselves. I think we all had that experience as Black folks when you get out of work and you want to just be around people that look like you. Oftentimes you have to go searching. Here in Chicago, for instance, where I'm from, there's a lot of great venues downtown that are upscale, but in our neighborhoods, we don't have those rooftop. Right, we don't have those super luxury event spaces, and we've talked to some of the city leaders about getting those going. But we want to be able to direct folks to places where they're going to be embraced instead of spending our money in venues and in places where we're just being tolerated.
There's this quote, because I do want to talk about the technology behind Eventnoire, but there's this quote before we do that. It comes from Steve Jobs, and it says, technology is nothing. What's important is that you have faith in people, that they're basically good and smart. And if you give them the tools, they'll do wonderful things with them. And when I think about what you've been doing, it's like you're utilizing tech, but like you're not just building tech for tech's sake. Like you're doing it to solve real problems in the community. Could you speak to that?
100%. When we first started out, we had the ugliest, worst platform in the world, and we're still far from where we want to be. We actually, we just closed our pre-seed round. We're launching the seed round to really get our technology where we want it to be. But for us, this is one thing we knew: if you can move people, you can move the world. And so we knew that we had an influence. And at any given time on a Friday night, if you can tell people to go somewhere and you can have 500 people pull up, there's power and influence in that. So for us, it was just all about creating that central marketplace, that central place where people can go and they see any event on that platform, they know it's for us. I had the experience traveling out of town where I go on, say, Eventbrite, amazing platform. When I go there, I'm like, okay, which one of these spots is for me, right? Which one am I going to see some people that look like me? If I want to see some beautiful women, where am I going to go? And I couldn't tell, right? And so when I was in New York, I said, okay, what's going on in Harlem? What's going on in Brooklyn? I know I'm going to see some more diversity there. So, our plans are to replicate this for the Latinx communities. We've already been approached by some LGBTQ organizations here. We all had that sense of wanting to be like people, be around people, where we can create that sense of community. And so for us, from a tech perspective, we're working on some things such as AI. We can be able to recommend events for folks. But anytime somebody would go out of town, they say, hey, Jeff, who's the Jeff of DC, New York, Atlanta? And I just got tired of getting these text messages. So I knew it was important for us to create a platform for that.
So let's talk about building the platform. You talked about how, non-glamorous it was in the beginning. And so often, we think, especially because we already get discounted as Black people building technologies and building platforms, that it's got to be beautiful by the time we launch. So talk about a little bit about how we can get away with putting up a WordPress site that does X, Y, Z, or launching something, on Squarespace or whatever, but that we don't have to go always and go hire engineers or learn how to code, but we can get out our beta or our MVP with using existing technologies.
Definitely. I have a couple of friends that have some no-code apps that they've been able to build on, Bubble. Bubble's a great platform out there. Whether you already have so many templates and any idea you think of, somebody's probably already done it, right? Ticketing's not a novel idea, but we have a twist on it that's able to serve our community's needs. And the most important thing for us was that the revenue that we get from ticket fees, we're able to get that back to our event partners and organizations we work with. So we're keeping that money within the Black community. But, for us, we did hire an offshore developer in India, and they created the most horrible platform out there. Luckily, we tested on our events and we had to scrap it within a couple of weeks. So we threw $25,000 down the drain when we first started. And had I known that we could have gone to a Bubble or gone to any of these platforms out there, or actually partnered with another ticketing company, the same way Jay-Z went and found a Norwegian, streaming platform that he purchased for $50 million and then rebranded his Tidal. There's people out there who already have platforms that you're working on, and they might just work with you to license it. For us, we decided to build it from scratch originally. It was a horrible, horrible decision because you oftentimes find these developers that are building your platform, some of them don't know what they're doing and they're oversell. So I really encourage people to look at Bubble to identify 5 to 10 companies that are already doing what you're doing and reach out to them and say, hey, can I leverage your technology and put leverage my marketing and my branding to do something a little bit different, but still create a win-win.
So you got a little bit of money now. Congratulations on the Mountain Dew thing. And so talk to me about what you learned about how to hire technical talent since you have the capital to do some of that now. Like, what did you learn in the process of making those mistakes that you can now have as part of your toolkit so that when you're interviewing technical talent, you know how to ask these questions?
Definitely. So as a CEO or as a founder, your job once you have some funds is to figure out how to hire people smarter than you, right? I'm not a tech founder. I'm somebody that's new to the tech space. And so it's important for us to be able to speak to individuals who can make your product better. So while interviewing folks, the biggest thing I'm looking for is people that tell me how wrong my platform is, how raw my technology is, and what are the possibilities of what it could be. And of course, looking at the experiences that they've had, it's important for us to understand the user experience of Black consumers. We are very active users digitally, and I've worked in digital marketing for years, and we peruse the internet differently. We navigate information differently. So it's important for us to hire folks who understand the user experience, and just how Black folks access information and what we prefer. So two things: making sure that they have the experience and working with similar types of industries. And then number two, making sure that they understand the Black consumer, because we're marketing to Black event attendees and event organizers, and they have unique needs. One of the best things about us starting was that we were our own customer. We tested the platform out on ourselves for a year and a half before we released it to anybody else. So a lot of the kinks that we experienced, that we knew about, we were able to jump ahead of. And so we're actually almost finished building out the third iteration of the platform, which we're releasing next month. And it just really has all the feedback we got from ourselves, but everything we took to learn during the pandemic, talking to our consumers. So making sure that person has real world experience and, it really has the proof, because everybody's going to sell you, especially devs, on what they can do. They all say they can do everything. So.
And from the other side of the table, a lot of developers are in high demand. Like, these people can go a lot of different places, especially the good ones, the ones that you're talking about trying to recruit and retain. What is the sell? Like, what is the big idea that you found that gets people to say, you know what? Yeah, I got these other offers, but I'm rocking with you.
From our perspective, equity is important, right? So we're looking for people that want to be a part of the long on the journey for the long haul. And so we're actually looking for a lead developer right now, and we're looking for somebody that understands where we can go and where we're trying to go. We're talking about 5-10 years down the road. We're not just looking to be an event platform. We want to be the BET of events. We're selling merchandise, right? We realized during COVID, we have to have incremental revenue streams. We're launching a subscription-based model. People don't just want to have ticketing and access to more capital. They want to know about how they can get more sponsorship for their events. They want to understand how they can build a 6-figure event. I mean, you guys have done amazing things with Afrotech. It's a place you have to be if you're in the tech space, right? BET, you have to go to the BET Awards if you're in entertainment, you want to network. And so we're trying to help event organizers become smarter, along with, selling tickets and getting a piece of their fees. So it's important to have somebody that's there for the long haul, somebody that, for me, I like when people say, hey, you know what, I'll take a little bit less money because I want equity. I want to get money on the back end, because it shows us that they understand the business and understand what the real opportunity is here.
I think about, I have this Oculus, right? And so I've read stories about Oculus, and like in the future, like you'll be able to sit courtside at an NBA game and not even be at the game, but you got your shades on. And I wonder your thoughts on how the future of events might look, and therefore, where does Eventnoire play when when virtual reality and augmented reality, become more prevalent and accessible for consumers to be able to take advantage of real world, and in any other case, entertainment.
It's super important that in the future we have a super hybrid platform that can leverage digital events. But just from a founder's experience of where my co-founders and I are, one thing we realized during the pandemic was that there's nothing that can replace an in-person event. And so, down the line, we're definitely going to have the AI piece, but sitting down with somebody, looking in their eyes, being able to dance with somebody, being able to talk to a DJ, request your favorite song, those are experiences you can't mimic in the digital space. And
DJs don't always like that, by the way.
They hate it, right? They hate it. But just being able to get that frown from them, until they get away, right? Like, there's nothing that can replace that. And we've seen that once the events have returned with the surge in revenue, of course, but just the number of people that are out, everything's, for all organizers, they're making more money they ever made. Everything's sold out. People want to meet in person. So I basically said that to say that we're creating more opportunities for folks to have those in-person events, understanding that down the line, we're going to have that hybrid technology. For now, we're making sure that all the Zooms all of those digital platforms can easily integrate with our platform. People can send their tickets out to their virtual link, and they can be able to actually, for Zoom, for instance, we're working on integration where you can, host your live events right on our interface.
I
So
mentioned
you either
that.
have, go ahead. So you either have to be able to integrate and work with those guys and have the proper APIs, or you're gonna have to build out your own platform that can manage the digital space as well.
So I mentioned that you guys got a little bit of money now, having won the Mountain Dew Challenge. So congratulations on that. And I think about what did you learn about winning a competition because you've got so many people who sign up for these things, and this is $1 million challenge. So having gone through that process, having pitched over and over and over again, getting through different levels of this competition, what did you learn that could potentially be a key for other people who are trying to get through processes and competitions and get picked for boot camps and get picked for accelerators? What you learned in that process that this might be the thing that people are missing and why they get rejected?
Man, special thanks to Mountain Dew, man. So many corporations, put their black boxes on Instagram and made their statements last year. And so for them to come through and really support an organization like they did and entrepreneurs like ourselves is amazing. So thank you to Pepsi, thank you to Blavity, BT, everybody that was involved. But to answer your question on that part, there were over 200 startups that applied, and there were some amazing startups with great technology. And what I realized is that when you have an idea, it's not about, how amazing your idea is to you. It's about how easy it is for other people to understand what you're trying to do and how easy it is for understand the impact that you can have and where you can take it to. So, we're an event ticketing platform, but our mission is we want to recycle $1 million annually back into community organizations, event organizations, event partners, just to keep that money within the community. And for us, we believe that impact piece tied in with just the fact that everybody has that same problem, right? You have to be able to solve a problem that everybody around you is experiencing and or that people can understand. When I pitched in 2020 during the pandemic to folks, and they weren't people that understood Black culture and the fact that our event ecosystem is different, very promoter driven, they just couldn't resonate with the problem, right? If I'm a 80-year-old, 70-year-old, white male, I may not understand that I can't get into certain venues because I'm Black. I'm not welcome in certain areas because I'm Black, and they definitely don't care about going to anybody's party, right? Or their gala. So I think that for us, we had an audience of folks who truly understood the pain point and problem, and the fact that there was a need in the community, but also really resonate with the impact. So my advice is simplify your pitch. Anytime I've talked to an investor, they didn't understand exactly what we did. It was almost like I lost them and they've never able to get them back. So definitely simplify your pitch and make sure that you're really making sure that problem that you're solving is something that people can relate to. And so just know your audience too, right? Like not everybody is going to be a good audience for you when you're pitching. So if you know your audience, know who you're talking to. We just happen, I believe, to have folks that really understood the problem that we're trying to tackle.
So how do you simplify that pitch when you could also run the risk of opening up yourself for questions of like, okay, where is the unique value here that you offer that other people in the space can't offer or not as well?
Yeah. Well, you definitely have to address that in your product plan. I think that the way to simplify your pitch, you should always be able to say it. I think one of my mentors, Gary Cooper, CEO Reaply, I think he just raised about 12 million. And you got to 5 to 6 words or less. You should be able to say what your company is, and people should be able to get it like that, right? Eventnoire we're essentially Eventbrite for the culture, right? We want to be where culture and events intersect, but we also want to be a ticketing platform that supports the Black community. And you got to be able to say that easily and simply. So you have some folks that, you talk about what they're doing, and they have an amazing, amazing product, but people just can't get it. You should be able to say it like that. And I think it's always good to be able to compare that to a similar company. I think he said his company is Google for supply chain, right? People can always relate to Google, Amazon, Eventbrite, right? So I think that's the easiest thing. Who are you trying to be? Because there's always somebody doing something similar to what you're trying to do, and communicate what you're doing differently.
Is there a way to say I'm Eventbrite for the culture and still not get pigeonholed into this way? Well, they're doing the same thing except it's just for Black people. Like, how do you communicate the value there? Or is there a different moat that simple pitch doesn't communicate?
Again, I mean, you do have to be able to elaborate on how you're different. Like when you first present who you are, with that quick, 30-second pitch, you should also talk about how you're different, right? We're taking and to take a backtrack, there's a number of companies that have done exactly what other companies have done and done it in a different way. We know what Bob Johnson did with BET. We know that MTV existed already, right? And he created a $1 billion company focusing on the consumer that he knew the best. So for us, when we talk about Eventnoire, we have a couple of things that make us different that can't easily be mimicked by larger companies. And that's one is sharing service fees. Most companies are too big and they don't want to give away that revenue, right? We're going to share those fees with our community partners. We're giving away 40% of our revenue, and that's kind of unheard of. But we're doing it because it's near and dear to our hearts to make sure that we're recycling dollars back into the Black community, right? We know the need for that economic empowerment. And we know that when an event partner has an event and they get an extra check for $5,000, right? They're event partners for life, right? So, I think that communicating how you're doing things differently is just as important as communicating simply what you're doing and comparing it to somebody else. So it's all part of your pitch.
So when I hear things like, we're giving away 40% of our revenue to community organizations, and all the conversations I've had, I think about, okay, what would a VC say to that? And because, as you know, like VCs want 10x, 20x, 100x returns. They want big, market opportunities and billion-dollar companies. How does an Eventnoire get to billion-dollar opportunity when you give away 40% of the revenue?
Well, you had to introduce incremental revenue streams. And for us, we knew that what we're doing in terms of giving away all that revenue isn't sustainable without charging a subscription. So later on in 2022, we're going to charge a prescription for all the added value that we're providing our users. But we're leveraging our incentive-based program right now to create that stickiness and really drive those relationships. But in January, we're going to charge a subscription fee so that, hey, it's going to make sense for you to pay the subscription fee because the return on investment is so big for you to share within those royalties. But now you can also sell merchandise and make extra money doing that. Now we can also put you in front of event sponsors. So figuring out how you consistently add value to your consumer base and be able to charge for that value add is how we're going to get to the billions.
How important is it for us to own the entire supply chain? So I think about this, like you're an event promoter, like you're a guy who throws events all over the country. And then you built the platform so you can sell tickets to these events. And then at some point you may own a spot. At some point you might, own the ISP that helps people get online to get to, so this whole value chain, because I think about, we try to do so many good things for our communities, but then we have to leverage technologies that we didn't build. Therefore, we spend money with other companies that doesn't come back to our communities. Like, what is your thoughts on how we can own the entire ecosystem and keep that dollar circulating in Black communities?
I will say this, huge power in data, right? We spend a lot of money hosting and promoting events on Facebook ads and Google ads. But if you create a comprehensive ecosystem of folks who are more likely to attend your event anyway, because it's mostly Black folks at our events, why shouldn't we be able to allow our partners to tap into that database to push their products, push their events? So I think of it like Google and Facebook, how we can create our own Googles, our own Facebooks, our own Amazons. And data is a big part of that. And there's no more of an active and engaged audience than somebody that attends events. So what we're essentially doing is looking to tie in the Black diaspora in the US, the UK, Africa. There's very similar experiences as relates to events and even racism in the UK, as you'll see in Paris, France. I went to Paris, and it was the one place in the world I went to where I felt like, wow, this is just like being in America in terms of the racism that I felt. We got turned away from a nightclub, and the guy was like, look, you're Black, it's no women with you. It's like, he basically told me why he couldn't get into the club. And the real reason was that we were Black and, we had baseball caps on. And so I feel like there's a unique experience that Black people have. And it's also this connectedness that we need to have that makes Eventnoire a global opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity to connect all of us internationally, right? The whole Black diaspora. My parents are both born in Nigeria. And when I go home, I see probably 3 guys that look like you will, right? I would see 3, 4 people like one of my friends back home. And so we're all connected, but we don't have an opportunity or a platform that connects us. So I want folks to be able to go to Nigeria and find an event on Eventnoire that they can attend when they travel there. So again, we're looking to create our own Google, right? Where now if you want to reach more Black folks from the diaspora, we have the data to be able to do that. So it's a larger data play.
I'm so glad you mentioned data, because when I think about you and people who do what you do well, one asset that you have that you can never be robbed of is the data that you have, the email list, so you could throw a party and you already got 50,000 people on this list, and you don't have to spend as much money, because I remember the story, and I think it was Tyler Perry and how he built his audience, and he had an email list of like 100,000 people. And so when he went to go throw a play in Chattanooga, he already had the consumers there who already bought in by supplying that email address, built-in audience. Talk about that and the importance of people who do things that are not necessarily technical, like throwing events, how they leverage data to do that better.
Definitely. And think about that, right? I worked in healthcare for quite some time. And I think about this, the same data that we're using to promote events. Imagine if we were to send that out to people to get information about access to capital, about home ownership, about healthcare, sharing the resources that we all have and making it easier to share that information. So in terms of monetizing data, that's what all these companies are doing, right? And I looked at, and this is one of the reasons why we're bringing together curators, promoters, curators, event party hosts, whatever you want to call those, right? Some promoters don't like to be called promoters, but I talk to promoters all the time and say, look, own what you are, but make sure that you're not just known for throwing parties. The data that you have is super, super powerful, right? We've been approached and worked with politicians for their political campaigns. Diddy was a party promoter, right? AJ from 106 in Park started off as a party promoter. You're learning how to interact with people every single day. And for people like myself that just love bringing people together, you can use that for so much good, right? And so I think that most people who are curators and promoters have to make sure they understand their influence and understand their power and understand that data can be used for good to add value to the people around you, your consumers' lives. And that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to serve our consumers in a different way and leverage that data to improve the quality of their lives. And so I plan to launch a number of companies that focus just on doing that and leveraging data to do it.
What's unique about building tech in Chicago?
Man, so Chicago's a unique place because most people understand it's one of the most beautiful cities, in the world, right? But it's also one of the most racist cities in the world. And people understand that there's these huge racial divides. We are a city of neighborhoods, and we have some of the brightest people in the world. And I know you guys have seen the influence of a lot of Chicagoans on the culture in terms of music, but it's a place where the story has always been that you got to get out of Chicago to make it. You have to go to one of the coasts. But there's a new generation of folks who have said, no, I'm not doing that. We're going to stay right here and we're going to build against all odds. And so it's a world-class city with world-class resources that unfortunately, if you're on the South and the West side, where the primarily African-American neighborhoods are, you don't necessarily get access to those resources downtown unless you work very hard to do that. And I'm excited about there being a change. We have a Black mayor right now. There's a number of Black founders who have been able to successfully raise money. And there's organizations like 1871, Polsky, that's the University of Chicago. And I was on a steering committee for Black Founders Accelerator. So there's this big surge, and I think it's happening around the country right now, of folks that are saying, you know what, it's time for a change. If you look at, John Monopoly, who's Kanye West's manager, he was he helped discover Virgil as well as Don C. He's on our board. He's passionate about making sure that he's uplifting folks from the city. So it's one of those places where it's a certain grittiness that if you have, you know that you can do anything. I mean, it's the home of Michael Jordan. It's the home of, arguably one of the hottest, rappers right now, Little Durk. But it's a place where you have to have that balance of grittiness and just, business acumen. And if you have that, you can really succeed. So one thing I like is that when you go anywhere, people can kind of point out folks from Chicago. I believe we have a certain swag to us, and we're used to getting the job done by any means necessary. So I'm a Chicagoan to Chicagoans, but luckily I've been able to travel. I lived in LA, lived in New York, and leveraging that network and bringing those things that I've learned back to Chicago has allowed me to do well here.
What would you say, because you are building, in a vertical that has big sharks in the water, and there are a lot of us in our community who have an idea, but because these big sharks are in the water, we say, you know what, maybe I should go do something else, or maybe this ain't for me, or maybe because people are asking about the sharks, maybe they're trying to tell me I shouldn't be playing in these waters. What would you say to people who have idea and want to do their thing, but there are those big players?
Man, in my opinion, every giant must fall, right? I mean, there's amazing companies out there, but every day that you're building, you're faster than, you're leaner than they are. You're probably more hip and can move faster than they can. You probably have your ear more to the street because sometimes those folks get comfortable. Also, it's important to learn from their moves. And there's enough, and this is one thing I want to say about us as being Black founders and organizations in general. There's enough money out there for all of us. So don't think that you can't carve out your niche. There's a lot of folks that say, hey, this person's already doing that. This person's already doing this. There's a number of ticketing companies out here, right? Some of them, are in the same area as us. And my thing is, you can always carve out your niche. You can always start with 20 people within your circle, grow that to 1,000, grow that to 50,000. It's possible. There's McDonald's, there's Wendy's, all right? There's Burger King. I think that you often find that people try to pin Black organizations either against each other and say, oh, they're competition, I can't collaborate. The reality is the opportunity is to collaborate, figure out how you guys can work together and make sure that you're more powerful. It's all about giving each other a seat at the table because there's enough money out there for everybody. And they're not, as you guys know, with a lot of our friends who've gotten our, access to a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of jokes about the PPP loans, but I hope that folks access that. But there's a lot of money out there. They're not going to stop printing it. And, so definitely don't be scared of the big guys.